Welcome to the show where I take something and attempt to analyze it, probably something to do with anime or the culture surrounding. I wouldn't have made such a bad pun otherwise. With the recent airing of Frigatsu no Lion, Sangatsu no Lion, or March Comes in Like a Lion, which is to my surprise being animated by the notorious studio known as Shaft, and with me wanting to make this show for quite a while but not having a means to do so, I have decided to talk about Shaft. When you hear about Shaft or when you think about Shaft, one of two anime tend to spring to mind: Bakemonogatari and Madoka Magica. Now if you haven't seen either of them or have no affiliation with them whatsoever, then more recent works like Nisekoi might come to mind. Or maybe it doesn't, but when you look at many of their shows, you do get an aesthetic fidelity that really screams out Shaft. The mastermind behind this is by the man himself, Akiyuki Shinbo, the main director for just about every Shaft show. Now when I say aesthetic fidelity, I am referring in part to the backgrounds that these shows have. Backgrounds may not be the first thing you think of when you associate a studio, but are things you would attach to certain shows, like the beautiful backgrounds of Nagi no Asukara. But when I think of Shaft and when I see the way they use colors, the only thing that I can think of is the backgrounds, and how each shot looks with not just the characters being the focus, but the added fidelity of a meaningful background. They are not only in part there to add visual flair, but also to add some sense of why the characters are there. In short, the backgrounds become a sort of kaleidoscope to analyzing the characters, a metaphor if you would. Now, not every scene in every show of Shaft will have the prominent backgrounds that I'm referring to, but another factor like colors then becomes the main aesthetic fidelity. That is what drives most of March Comes in Like a Lion, and to look at just the first episode, we see the very prominent use of colors, mainly to contrast the main character's dreary disposition with the rest of the show, rather the family that is very much a whiff of levity. But I'm not here to analyze March Comes in Like a Lion. To go back to background, many of the backgrounds of Shaft shows are very distinct, and are done in a way that at first may seem overbearing. One of the main proprietors to this is the excessive use of colors, and if not excessive, then definitely very glaring and abstract. To look at one of the main examples of this, and a very fun one at that, I bring to you the first two episodes of Bakemonogatari. When you look at Bakemonogatari, it is probably one of the shows that may seem the most colorful of Shaft shows, at least to me. It was the one that was the most jarring and maybe accustomed to what Shinbo's style is and what to expect. It really is a visual treat once you're able to conform to the kind of obscurity this show holds. Many of the scenes involve Araragi and his adventures out in the city to live in. It's the setting for the show, so it is to be expected, but the city itself becomes a character. It's a place where a myriad of apparitions divulge around, a centrifuge for all that is strange, such is why the expert Oshino has set up shop there, and such is why we as fans have come to latch onto it. In the first episode, we see Araragi and Senjugo riding down the streets to meet Oshino. We are accompanied by many shots of the city to get a sense of the setting. In the span of the whole ride, we get one prevailing thematic color scheme, a very darkened, orange tone that implies the feeling of dusk. This is to set the time for when this all happens. It's close to night. Except in this color palette, we also see white, a very bright white that shadows over some of the scenery. The tone of the shots all set up this very mellow and calming atmosphere, much fitting to what's happening. A bike ride. All the colors and what's being shown are vindicative of what an afternoon in the city might look like, but again, they have these specific objects in the shots painted white. Why white? Not only does white catch your eyes in these shots because of the darker contrast, but there might be another reason. White can be symbolized as a color for purity and truth, or mourning. Mourning is a more interesting interpretation of the use of white. There isn't much implication of mourning in any of what's happening so far, though it can be seen as foreshadowing. Senjugo is a tragic character. Her mother fell into a religious scam, invited one of the cult members into their house only to have him attempt to rape Senjugo. She resisted, hit the man with a spiked shoe, and her mother was punished in the cult, and her relations with her mother has long since faded. The sense of mourning comes therein with the guilt of what she did. Senjugo has since felt guilty for all that's happened, and the crab, the apparition that has stolen her weight, what Oshino refers to as an emotion god, has taken all of that away. In a very roundabout way, her burden has been lifted off of her, and until now she has been stuck living life like this, guilty, but unable to put any weight into that guilt. Despite the reversal of the weight loss not doing anything, she still wants it back. In a figurative sense, to gain her weight is to have agency over her guilt again. To recover the feelings that the crab had protected her from, and to be able to hold those memories and the pain from her mother is her decision. It is her way of choosing to live her life. In a more literal sense, the color of white can then be a pun on a white lie. A white lie being a lie that is very minor, that is intended not to harm anyone, but rather to protect and to preserve someone's feelings. That sound familiar? The first few shots of white are very subtle. It then gradually becomes much more apparent, being put in the foreground. This is the escalation of the white lie. Once the white crab took her burdens away, it became a white lie. Her being unaffected by this, her keeping her feelings, her past away from her is a white lie, intended to protect herself. Once the white is in our faces, it is what we see here, the white lie coming back to bite Senjugahara, and what we see later with how she deals with it. The first glaring contrasting shot then comes with the fence and flowers. This is the melding of both the darker and calmer state of her psyche. When she first lost her weight, all the feelings were taken away from her. Just like the dusk of the day, it is a state of calming, and like the city, empty. The opposite is also true then when the white is on the pillars and the darker overtones are under it. The white lie is not something that pervades her psyche, not something that was stalking behind her, but is now the defining feature of her angst and character. It is something much more apparent, much like the increasing appearance of the white. There's also a subtle shot with the white blending in with the fence, again, to propagate the blending of the calm nature that once resided within Senjugahara, and the calm nature of the situation that is not really calm and not serene at all, but indeed filled with something much deeper. Much of the other shots can all be summed up in that way if looking at the color of white to mean mourning and a white lie. Before looking at the other implications of white, one of the shots I want to give special attention to is this one. Leading up into the school, the vibrancy of the white shoots up, and where we see Araragi asking for Senjugahara's stash of staplers, we also get a very bright white foreground. This is probably the most jarring and juxtaposed, as we have the two main characters as a set piece, accompanied by the white fence. All darker regions are cast away and even brightened by the concentrated white. This is where the action will happen. The school, where Senjugahara will have her problems dispelled, where things come to end. This is the amalgamation of her white lies, of her mourning, and as such, a shot filled most of the scene with white is fitting. Her problems will come out here in full force, and leave, slowly dissipate into the background as she deals with it in her own way. Okay, so, going back to the other meaning of white, purity and truth. Instead of thinking that white has only one of these interpretations, I like to think that it has all of them. And this can be done when you see where it's being shown. I like to hold true to what I said about white being mourning and white lies in the scenes of episode 1, but once we head into the meat of it into episode 2, white becomes symbolic of purity and truth. In this vein, it becomes a literary conceit, an extended metaphor. In the scene preceding, she mentions pure clothes and goes for white. This is all part of Oshino's ritual to expel the white crab on her. She needs to be purified. She also took a shower beforehand, which in Japanese culture and Shintoism is a symbol for expunging oneself of all that is impure. Water has always held that kind of power in the East, hence why you wash yourself before shrines to purify yourself. This is all very literal when you look at the symbolism of white in this latter half. It is of purity. She wants to purify herself of the apparition, of the sin that is to lie, that is to ignore what she has done and not uphold her guilt. The white here of not only her clothes, but even of the white crab itself and her vision of it also takes on its own meaning. When she sees the crab, it is all over a white backdrop. The most integral part of this whole ordeal takes place through Senjugahara's perspective, as everything becomes white. Not because she is being purified though, but because of the other meaning of truth. The purity of white is referenced throughout, and she does become purified at the end, but to do so she has to first be honest, to ask the crab for her weight back. She is genuine when she does so, her pains and sorrow, her mourning and her white lies, all things she wants to hold for herself. She has mustered the strength to be able to handle it all. This is her turmoil, this trauma is her character. Her tears are likewise white, to signify the pure honesty in her words. And to go back to the idea of purity, she is bathed in white light at the end. White now meaning all of which was discussed. She has become pure through her own honesty, and the white lies and mourning that she now has to deal with will not linger or haunt her. Her whole being here is illuminated in white, such as how she is symbolically and how she actually feels. And again, all of this imagery and artful use of backgrounds and colors is done in March Comes In Like a Lion. To go more on that in this video isn't my intention, but to put forth the idea that the seemingly abstract nature of Shinbo has a deeper meaning is something I'm going for. Many of Shaft's shows, and by association Shinbo's works, are done in a very similar manner. Bright backgrounds that push the foreground. Color is used in interesting ways, but to look at just that is missing the point. There's meaning behind it, and to me, that's the beauty of Shaft. That's the aesthetic fidelity. Hopefully when you get around to watching March Comes In Like a Lion, you'll come to appreciate the beautiful imagery that Shaft has incorporated into it, the way they use colors, the way the characters are being likewise shown not only by their actions and words, but also by how the shots are rendered. This is Shaft's trademark to me, the way they can tell a whole story all of its own just by their color usage, the way they blend it so that it makes sense if you think about it, the way it's done in such a nuanced way that I really don't see in any other studio. But that's just my view on it, and thinking about it like that, to view March Comes In Like a Lion as more than what it just gives us, but also as to what it hides within their shots, is fun. Again, I'm not here to analyze the intricacies of March Comes In Like a Lion, I may do it some other time, but I feel like with this show, and with the connotation that Shaft has being such an obscure studio, I want this to be kind of a way for me to show why just watching March Comes Like a Lion takes away some of its value. Why doing that with not only just Shaft shows, but any show takes away from its value. I sure as hell had fun looking back on Bakemonogatari, and being able to analyze it again in this way made me more appreciative of the story. In fact, it even made it better. I suggest trying it, and hey, this video is based off of an easy target, a new Shaft show. Alright guys, that was the first episode of my segment here on Otaku Box, the channel where we post a lot of anime, otaku related things. If you actually liked this video, or if you want to check out our other stuff, we have a new show, a podcast, our kind of first impressions. You can subscribe, share, do all that stuff that all channels ask you to do. It's cool to be able to see if we actually have an audience or not. Either way, we'll still be making otaku type content because hey, it's pretty fun.